What if Qui-Gon continued to train Obi-Wan even after death as a Force ghost? That's our story for today. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's get right into it. It begins as Qui-Gon Jinn is dying in Obi-Wan Kenobi's arms. Qui-Gon can feel his life fading, and in this moment, he can see the truth. Anakin Skywalker, the boy he found on Tatooine, is the chosen one. He has no doubt of it, and his mission to train the boy has been cut immediately short. So Qui-Gon looks up to Obi-Wan, and he makes Obi-Wan promise to train the boy. Obi-Wan says he will do it, and Qui-Gon let go, giving himself to the living Force. What felt like both an eternity and only a second later, Qui-Gon began to wake up. Years ago, he trained to achieve life after death within the Force as a Force ghost, but he had no idea what that would truly be like. And today, Qui-Gon woke up in some sort of alternate, spiritual realm. He heard voices around him, screaming, laughter, happiness, sadness. Every emotion, every moment of his life surrounded him now, and as Qui-Gon looked around, trying to process everything, the group of Force priestesses that he trained with came to him, saying that the balance of the Force is in grave danger. Qui-Gon listened as the priestesses said that Anakin's destiny was to be trained by Qui-Gon to destroy the Sith, but with Qui-Gon dead, realities are shifting, the future is in motion. Nothing is set in stone. Anakin is in danger, the galaxy is in danger, the Force is in danger of being taken over by one of the most powerful dark side users to ever exist. So the Force priestesses granted Qui-Gon access to a loophole. He cannot have direct contact with Anakin, but he can have contact with Obi-Wan, train him to train the boy. In the galaxy itself, some time had passed, and Obi-Wan was meditating in the Jedi Temple alone. Anakin was being given a temple tour with some of the other younger, newer Jedi, and Obi-Wan had just spoken to Yoda not long ago. Obi-Wan was able to convince the Grand Master to let him train Anakin, but now that the training has been granted, Obi-Wan has become extremely nervous. This responsibility was extremely huge. He was barely a Jedi Knight, and now he was to train this chosen one. So he reached into the Force, remembering his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, wondering what he would do in this spot. He even tried finding his master in the Force, and as he tried this, Obi-Wan could almost feel his presence. No, this was real. Obi-Wan spoke, asking who was here with him, and the voice of Qui-Gon resonated in Obi-Wan's head, saying that he was here, telling Obi-Wan to trust his instincts. And Obi-Wan could not believe this. Could it be real? The feeling in the Force faded, and Obi-Wan was left with no one but himself. He could even feel the tears in his eyes. He desperately missed his master, and Kenobi quickly came to the conclusion that his attachment to Qui-Gon could be causing him to feel these things, hear these voices in the Force. This was all wrong. All of his training from Yoda and the Council told him to let go of everything that he feared to lose. Sure, Qui-Gon may have taught him differently, but he was gone now. Obi-Wan had to let go of him, or he could end up down a very dark path. And so he did, letting the feeling of his master fade away. He would train Anakin Skywalker, and it would have to be a very strict regimen. The boy carried darkness deep inside of it. The Council had seen it, and Obi-Wan would have to train him in a way that would show the Council that the darkness would be kept hidden away forever. And inside of the Force netherworld, Qui-Gon watched as he was shut off from Obi-Wan. He could feel that his former Padawan was scared, confused, determined to do what he must to train Anakin, and Qui-Gon realized that perhaps he let the influence of the Council seep into his training of Obi-Wan just a bit too much. Upon feeling Qui-Gon in the Force, Obi-Wan saw it as an attachment in the darkness, rather than in the light. And Qui-Gon called out for help, but no one answered him. He was alone now, in a place where time moves differently. Everything was different. This was the past, the present, and the future. But the future was murky, clouded by the dark side, and Qui-Gon could not have access to it, not until Obi-Wan let him in. And so Qui-Gon had to trust in the Force that sometime soon, someday, Obi-Wan will let him back in. Back in the galaxy, years would go by, years of training between Anakin and Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan would train Anakin as the Council would see fit, rather than how Qui-Gon would have seen fit. Qui-Gon was gone, the Council was not, and Obi-Wan had to abide by what they would want. This, unfortunately, was the opposite of what Anakin needed. Anakin wanted to help people. He wanted to be free. But the more he trained with Obi-Wan, the more he felt held back, the more he felt like the slave on Tatooine. Anakin wanted to explore the galaxy, wanted to free people, bring down the bad people of the world, of the galaxy. But instead, he was stuck on Coruscant, training in the Jedi Temple. He would often be late for training because he overslept, largely because he had trouble sleeping overall. He missed his mother deeply. He lived 10 years with her, and going from having a mother to having an out-of-touch Jedi Master was just not ideal. Obi-Wan wanted to be what Anakin needed, but he just wasn't. And he knew it, though he didn't know how exactly to fix it. Some nights, Obi-Wan would even wake up to see Anakin sleeping on the floor in his room. Anakin sought a deep connection, but Obi-Wan didn't know how to provide it. Eventually, Obi-Wan would try to open up a little bit, and he would become like a brother to Anakin. The two would argue and bicker constantly, but at the end of the day they respected and genuinely liked each other. It helped Anakin a good amount, but soon enough, two things would change Anakin forever. He and Obi-Wan were sent on a mission to protect Senator Padme Amidala, someone Anakin had thought about every day since becoming a Jedi, and at the same time, Anakin began having nightmares about his mother. She was being hurt, tortured, and he again could not sleep in fear of these dreams being real. When he met Padme again, Anakin was overcome with excitement, but it was also extremely awkward. After all, it's not like Anakin was getting chances to flirt with women every day. He was terrible at it. But that same night, as Padme went to bed and the two Jedi stood together, Anakin told Obi-Wan everything, that he was having dreams about his mother, and that he needed to save her. But Obi-Wan used the advice from the Council, telling Anakin to let go. Obi-Wan, though, could sense a great shift in Anakin, like letting go would be impossible for him. And Obi-Wan thought on this for a while, considering what Qui Gon would do, considering trying to reach out to him again, wondering if that feeling from years ago could have been real. It was something that Obi-Wan often thought about, that feeling in meditation, but something he feared. But suddenly they had to save Padme from poisonous bugs in her room. After some time, the Jedi would find the bounty hunter, but she died right before she could tell them anything. The next morning, Obi-Wan and Anakin had a scheduled meeting with the Jedi Council, but it was not for a few hours. In the meantime, Obi-Wan meditated. He was extremely troubled by what he felt within Anakin last night. He was having dreams about his mother. If they came true, and Obi-Wan did nothing, he would feel terrible. If it weren't for the feeling of Qui-Gon all those years ago, Obi-Wan likely would have let things play out. But today, he remembered the days after Qui-Gon died, when Obi-Wan could still feel him in the Force. And so, here and now, Obi-Wan meditated, and while he meditated, he decided to go against his better judgment, and try to find someone in the Force that he was supposed to let go of so long ago, but he just could not do it. If somehow Qui-Gon was alive in the Force, Obi-Wan would find him. And so in the Force netherworld, time moved differently. Though around 8 years had passed in the galaxy, Qui-Gon had no concept of how long it had been since he last communed with Obi-Wan. He spent his time in here, training himself in the Force to show himself, if he was ever called upon. And finally, today, Qui-Gon felt his connection with Obi-Wan begin to reopen. Qui-Gon smiled. He knew deep down that this day would come, and so he allowed himself to be shown to Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan meditated inside of his room, and slowly he felt the presence of his old master. It was unmistakable, and Obi-Wan opened his eyes in complete shock, seeing his old master standing in front of him. Qui-Gon looked at him and chuckled, saying, "Took you long enough." And though he couldn't believe his eyes, Obi-Wan began talking with his former master Qui-Gon. It was amazing for him, reuniting with Qui-Gon, and the two talked for a while as Qui-Gon explained everything about how he was able to do this. Eventually, Obi-Wan brought up Anakin's nightmares, saying he was unsure of what to do. Qui-Gon asked Obi-Wan what the responsibility of a Jedi should be, and Obi-Wan said they are keepers of peace for the Republic. Qui-Gon shook his head, discouraged, saying the Jedi are supposed to be keepers of the peace for the people. If they are aware an innocent person is in danger, then it is a Jedi's duty to help them. Obi-Wan said he understands. He and Anakin were to choose the person in need of help, rather than protecting the Senate. It was the right thing to do, and the two of them talked for a while longer, as friends, before Obi-Wan had to go to the council meeting with Anakin. Once in the middle of the council, Anakin was assigned a personal mission to protect Senator Amidala without Obi-Wan. This would be Anakin's first mission alone. But Obi-Wan butted in, saying that Anakin is not ready, and the council all looked very shocked, but Obi-Wan insisted that Anakin cannot yet go alone. Mace Windu sighed, saying he should trust the boy, but Obi-Wan insisted again and again, saying the both of them will protect Padme, and eventually the council agreed. Once the meeting was over, Anakin got Obi-Wan alone, and angrily asked what all that was about. Anakin said he was more than ready, but Obi-Wan asked him to calm himself. Once Anakin finally did, Obi-Wan said they were going to save his mother on Tatooine. Anakin's face lit up now, with a mix of surprise and joy, and he asked what about Padme, so Obi-Wan said she will just have to come with them. In time, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme would land on Naboo and inform Padme of what they must do. She was perfectly fine with the idea of saving someone in need, and so they took off to Tatooine. Eventually, the three of them would meet the Lars family and find out what happened to Anakin's mother. She was captured by the Sand People. Obi-Wan found this extremely strange, as the Sand People usually wouldn't do this unless they had good reason to. Something was not adding up, and so Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the translator droid C-3PO that Anakin built years ago took off through Tatooine, searching for quite a long time for the Tusken camp. They spoke to Jawas and other locals, searching and searching, until eventually they came upon a ledge overlooking the camp. Anakin reached into the Force, and he could feel his mother. She was in great pain, and Anakin tried to take off, but Obi-Wan held him back, saying there is an easier way to do this. Anakin was angry, but he listened, and soon they walked down to the camp right in the open until the Tuskens saw them. And at once, the group got into a defensive position, and Obi-Wan used C-3PO to translate a conversation. Obi-Wan said they were just looking for someone, a woman, roughly 25 years older than Anakin, and they just want to make sure she is safe. C-3PO translated the Tusken reply, and they said they have the woman, but she cannot leave. She must pay, as she murdered a Tusken family. Anakin was extremely angry now, and so he ignited his lightsaber. The Tuskens yelped in fear, and C-3PO said that they were saying this is the same weapon that was used to kill the Tusken family. Now, Obi-Wan thought this really didn't make any sense. Obi-Wan and the Tusken leader talked once more, and eventually Obi-Wan learned that a Tusken family was slain with one of these laser swords. A white bearded man had come to the Tusken camp, informed them that it was the woman they now held captive. Obi-Wan offered a bag of food and some water from their speeder, saying they come in peace, and that the Tuskens were deceived by this man. After some more time and convincing, the Jedi were brought to the hut where Shmi was being held. She was alive, and Anakin was able to save her just in time. It was a lovely reunion between son and mother, and meanwhile, Obi-Wan asked where they could find this white-bearded man. So Anakin brought Shmi back home, while Obi-Wan traveled with a group of Tuskens through the night. They went on through the Junlan wastes for what felt like forever, and Obi-Wan was so glad he would never live in a place like this, until they eventually came upon some sort of makeshift base or hut of some sort. Obi-Wan carefully stepped inside, but it was completely empty. It was well furnished, and Obi-Wan looked around to see a communications device, and on it was a saved recording. Whoever was last here had to leave in a hurry. Obi-Wan messed with it until a recorded conversation came up, and Obi-Wan learned who used this hut and who framed Shmi, Count Dooku himself. And he spoke to a hooded man who told Dooku to leave for Geonosis immediately. And then the hooded man said that once he is granted emergency powers by the Senate, the Clone Wars can finally begin. Obi-Wan was completely shaken and taken aback. Dooku was speaking to Chancellor Palpatine? There was a plot here, far deeper than Obi-Wan could even begin to grasp, so he transmitted the recording to his own datapad and traveled back to Anakin. Once Anakin and Padme were informed of everything, they agreed the Council must see this. So Obi-Wan transmitted the recording to the Jedi Council. It was clear now that Palpatine was somehow the Sith Lord behind everything. Inside the Council, Mace Windu and Yoda were preparing to leave for a Senate meeting when they received this transmission. Upon viewing it, they too realized that the Sith had risen directly under their nose. They were planning a war, and everything was going to start on Geonosis. Yoda had recently heard back from Plo Koon and Kit Fisto, two Jedi that took over Obi-Wan's investigation into the clone army on Kamino, and Yoda told those two Jedi to be ready. They have the clones now, and they would launch a surprise attack on Geonosis sooner than the Sith expected. Meanwhile, the two Jedi traveled to the Senate, and right before Palpatine could be granted emergency powers, they interrupted the meeting, saying they have something to share with the Senate. Everyone was confused, including Palpatine, and then Palpatine's world was shattered as the Jedi played a message between him and Dooku. When the message ended, roars would fill the Senate, and Palpatine didn't even have time to defend himself before Mace, Yoda, and a pod of Republic guards got to him, placing force-restraining handcuffs around his wrists. Palpatine was arrested and brought to the Jedi Temple. Meanwhile, on Geonosis, Count Dooku was waiting for new orders from his master when he felt a sudden shift in the Force. He exited the Separatist base and looked to the sky, where a fleet of Republic Star Destroyers just emerged. Dooku began to panic. They were far too early. The Separatists were completely vulnerable. But as Dooku moved back inside, the Republic clone troopers were given orders from the Senate to destroy the droid facilities. They had clear evidence that these facilities were being used to go to war with the Republic, and so the fleet fired down, destroying the facilities, destroying Dooku and the Separatist Council in minutes. Inside of the Jedi Temple, former Chancellor Palpatine was being held in a cell that was completely ray-shielded off, and an ancient creature called Isalamir were spread around the room. These creatures drained the Force from any Force user they were near, and so Palpatine was now just a regular, corrupt politician, stuck inside of a prison cell without any Separatist army. The Jedi, upon realizing the Sith rose from right under them, pulled away from the Republic and moved back to the planet Tython, where one of the first Jedi temples was built. The Republic no longer needed the Jedi. They have the clone army, and the Jedi would be able to go back to protecting the people rather than the Senate. Once the Jedi were gone, Palpatine was executed by the clone troopers with his Force powers completely drained. During this process, and for the next handful of years, Qui Gon Jinn would continue to be with Obi Wan whenever he needed guidance. Obi Wan would train Anakin to be the Jedi he was always meant to be, thanks in large part to Qui Gon. He would allow Anakin to be himself, bend some rules, including the formation of a couple attachments. Anakin would often visit his mother, and he even formed a romantic relationship with Padme Amidala. Qui-Gon came to peace with who he became and what his purpose was after death. He watched over Anakin and Obi-Wan. Both of them felt like family to him, and because of his guidance, Obi-Wan was in the right place at the right time. Qui-Gon could only wonder what Anakin would have done if he'd gone to the Tuscans alone. It was clear now that Dooku and Sidious were using Shmi to get Anakin to use the dark side, but because of the influence of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, Anakin stayed calm, and the Jedi found out the truth just before a galactic war could break out. And folks, that is our story for today. Hope you enjoyed. A couple things I want to talk about, mainly the stuff on Tatooine. So there was a cut line from Revenge of the Sith, where it's shown that Count Dooku actually hired the Tusken Raiders. It was right before Dooku's head was cut off. Palpatine was supposed to convince Anakin to do it by saying that Dooku hired the Tuskens. No, it was cut. That's not canon. It's barely Legends. But it's a storyline that I wanted to use for this, to really show something like, perhaps if Anakin didn't kill his mother, everything would just dramatically change. That's what I wanted to do, because, Qui-Gon influenced Obi-Wan to help go save the mother, so really wanted to use that storyline and just have it really just expand into stopping the Sith. Aside from that, Dooku did have a known base on Tatooine, so that just further helped my storyline here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was really maybe bending canon more than usual, but I thought it was a good way to go, because, saving his mother was very influential. Also, Force Netherworld stuff, it's always fun to do, especially with Qui-Gon. I just think he's, one of the first to get there, of course, and having that stuff with past, present, future all mixed up, just having him train to project himself, I enjoy that. Obi-Wan cutting him off, sure I could have done where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon basically train Anakin together, but I've done stuff like that in the past, so I wanted to do this, where it just takes until Attack of the Clones. So, let me know what you guys thought of that. I enjoyed this one, I hope you did as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.